Hello, John here. This video is about my favourite Sega console of all time, and it is... Yes, you've guessed it, the Sega Saturn. So nice. I bought it twice. Well, 3 times technically. So yes, it's the Sega Saturn. Now, I seen this, first time I seen it running was in Comet, as most of my peers at my age and my friends, we seen them running there. But the first time I had a proper play of it was at my uncle's house, and eventually he sold his Sega Saturn to my parents so they could give me it for Christmas. And it became not a bad Christmas, but it was memorable for all the wrong reasons. The idea was because my Bush portable TV didn't have a SCART socket, and as you know, the Model 1 Sega Saturn came with a SCART lead. So the idea was that my parents would give me their VHS player that had a SCART socket, because my uncle ran his Sega Saturn through his VHS player and I would swap them about. So come Christmas Day I tried to set up the Saturn through the VHS player, but it wasn't working for some reason and we couldn't figure out why. So a few phone calls to my uncle and he brought up his VHS player he used to run the Sega Saturn, and I got up and running on Christmas Day. I picked up quite a few games in the first year I had the Sega Saturn. My favourites out the bunch were Virtua Fighter 2, although I did try and refund it and get money back from Comet, scratching the disc, hoping to get a refund, but it never happened. But thankfully it still played on the Sega Saturn. Street Fighter Alpha 2, Guardian Heroes. Me and my mate Adam played Guardian Heroes to death. We unlocked all the characters and then started playing the insane battle mode where you had like 12 characters at once on screen, I think. It was fantastic. I got the Bubble Bubble Rainbow Islands compilation from a company called Special Reserve, and they were a absolute shitty company. Proper shit. They sent me the PlayStation version, I can remember it, I was absolutely raging. Had to send that back at my expense until they eventually sent me the Sega Saturn copy. It was fucking livid. And for Guardian Heroes I got them from GameSpot. It was back in the day when you sent off postal orders, because I rented Guardian Heroes first, but then I got it from them because it was dead cheap. And the same with X-Men Children of the Atom. That was a hard 2D fighter, it still is to this day, especially when you get to the last boss, Magneto. It's absolutely ridiculous. I ended up completing them with Akuma. Completing the game with Akuma. It was just bloody hard, and that was sheer luck that I won it. I never won it again. Never completed it again, sorry. But my favourite games for the system were Guardian Heroes, Fighting Vipers, Sonic Jam. That was a brilliant compilation. It was so well done, and I didn't understand how companies struggled on the Xbox to get the lock-on system working if they could do it in the Sega Saturn. I think I mentioned Street Fighter Alpha 2. Eventually, unfortunately, I only had my first Sega Saturn for a year because all my friends ended up getting a PlayStation. They never got a Sega Saturn, and by that point games for the Sega Saturn were becoming really hard to come by, and there was no way I could get my Saturn chipped, because where we live you'd have to send it off, and there was no internet at that time, or at least a proper internet setup where you could send it off to companies and things like that. And I didn't really want to sell it, but my parents were like, well, you can't have a Saturn and PlayStation, so I ended up selling the Saturn to fund the PlayStation. And don't get me wrong, the PlayStation is a marvellous machine, but when it comes to 2D fighters, which is the reason why I have the Japanese Sega Saturn, is solely so I can play the Capcom 2D fighters, mainly the Versus games. I did have Alpha 3 or 03 for the Japanese Sega Saturn, but because it's all in kanji, then I couldn't really do the World Tour mode, so I was a bit miffed, so I sold that on. But a few years later when I was in college, I picked up this Sega Saturn I've got here from, it was a website called Saturn Planet, and that came with Tomb Raider, and then I started off getting games for it that I had, like Guardian Heroes, and games that I didn't, like Shinobi X, and I'm glad I did. And if you do start collecting for the Sega Saturn, I suggest you pick up this Action Replay 4M cart. It does allow you to play some import games, I say on the face there, on the console. You can't play the Capcom games, the sound goes all glitchy, and I think some other games have compatibility issues. But it's a brilliant card to have, and in fact it's a memory card as well, which is brilliant because the battery backup on the Sega Saturn fails within a year. I did forget to mention Christmas Nights into Dreams and Nights into Dreams. I always play that at Christmas time or round about December time and unlock everything again if it's not saved on the memory card or the battery backup has died. Just because I love Christmas and that game just seems to imbue Christmas and all that it stands for. So I've waffled on a bit more than I thought I would, but that should hopefully convey the passion that I have for this machine. I do have a Sega Dreamcast, but well, that's more powerful. For me, this Sega console, while I have more memories of the Mega Drive, this for me is my favourite Sega console of all time.